Good morning, everybody. Please can I welcome everyone to this meeting of Cabinet on Thursday, the 20th of March, 2025 from the Walton Suite, Winchester Guildhall. The time is 9:30 a.m. My name is Councillor Martin Todd, Chairperson of the Cabinet and Leader of the Council. This meeting is live streamed from the Council's YouTube channel and the recording will also be available after the meeting. Subtitles can be switched on and advice on how to turn these on is set out online. Can everyone ensure mobile phones are on silent, and can I remind members to use their microphones? In the unlikely event that it is necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow all the instructions given to you by our team. Turning to the agenda, the first item is apologies for absence. I have apologies for absence from Councillor Thompson. I think that's it. Yep. Second item is disclosure of interest. I need to declare that I have a disclosable pecuniary interest in respect of item 5 on the agenda due to my additional role as a Hampshire County Councillor. However, as there's no material conflict of interest regarding this item, I have a dispensation granted by the Audit and Governance Committee that enables me to speak and vote on the matter. Anyone else want to make the declaration? Councillor Porter.
I would like to make the same declaration, please.
Thank you very much indeed. In terms of requests from councillors to speak, I have a request from Councillor Horrell to speak on item 5, since there is only item 5. That seems very reasonable. We have no public participation. So moving to the matter of substantive business before us today. Cabinet, last night I laid out the contents of this paper at full council. And so you've heard what there is to be said about it since you were all there. A paper mostly agreed and drafted by leaders from across Hampshire and the Solent in this room. And since I know you were all there, heard the arguments made and the comments raised, I don't think I need to repeat the basic case of the paper, and I'm also assuming that you've read it as well. However, I did promise council that I would bring their comments to this meeting, and so that is what I will now do. I suppose the important thing to say is that overall, I heard very clearly that while councillors have concerns about the national process that we're being made to work to, we believe it is right for Winchester City Council to submit this interim plan. They supported the issues and barriers that are raised within it, and they were clear that they wanted us to put the voices of residents first as we go forward from here, and that is what we will do. There were various themes in the comments that were made by fellow councillors last night. The first sort of area that we discussed was the importance of keeping talking to all our neighbours. Winchester will work to stay in one process and play an active role in that process. The one area where people wanted more clarity in the plan at an early point was on engagement, particularly as soon as we get anywhere near options that they can respond to. And again, that engagement is part of keeping residents at the heart of the plans. There were some very helpful points made about equalities and diversity, age, gender, and other areas that may affect participation, particularly for councillors in any new unitary caring responsibilities work. And they wanted that reflected not just in our thinking about engagement, but also our thinking about how the council might work in the future. They wanted the leaders to think seriously and early on the topic of localism and local identity, empowering local councillors and communities, and again thinking about how that would be built into the plan. And a term used by Councillor Horrell was "steal with pride," and not just on these issues. And make sure that the wider system works as well. It is, of course, absolutely essential that any proposal that comes out works for the residents, businesses, communities of the Winchester district, but it has to work for the entire region. It has to work everywhere. And I think we will be advocates of that. The second thing that came through was the importance of supporting parishes and local communities through the change that is coming. There was a point raised by Councillor Warwick about assets of community value. A particularly strong theme that came through was the importance of supporting our southern parishes in standing up for their communities, making sure that they are consulted, but also make sure that we think about what any new council that they would be in would offer them as well, as part of any discussion. But as well as supporting the Southern parishes, there was a point about supporting the town and the need to move ahead with the work for a potential town council. And as part of that, to think about the relationship with Headbourne Worthy and Headbourne Worthy Parish, which of course includes Kingsbarn. And we also had a useful discussion, I think, about the role of councillors in this and how important individual city councillors are in going out, engaging with their communities and parishes, explaining what's going on, hearing the views of their local residents, and bringing that back to this council and to me to reflect in future negotiations with other leaders. And I appreciate all the councillors who are already doing this. We had a brief discussion, although the purpose of the meeting wasn't about devolution. We did talk about that as well, to make sure that we don't lose pace in implementing it, but also the need to set a duty to set a strategy for carbon and nature, and also to push for representation of districts in the interim combined county authority. And I was very pleased that colleagues also noticed what we had highlighted as the #1 priority for our journey between now and the implementation of any unitary system, which is the importance of supporting our staff, because it is a lot of stress and change that people need to think about, as well as for some people, such as the chief executive and others, a huge amount of extra work. So that support is really important. I'm very grateful to any councillors, to those councillors who are offering support, and I am, of course, very grateful for the continued commitment of our officers and staff as they keep working for our communities during this transitional period. So I promised that I would bring those comments to Cabinet. I've now done so. But what I also said is, based on the input I'd received, I would be asking Cabinet to endorse the interim plan that we have in front of us today. And having thought about it overnight, that still remains my position. So I know that Councillor Horrell has a few words that she'd like to say, but then having heard that, having considered her comments, we'll then move on to the main discussion. But my recommendation remains that we should move ahead. Councillor Horrell, would you like to come forward and make your comments?
Thank you, Chair, and I don't want to prolong your meeting, but I did want to just reinforce some elements from last evening. But I wanted to begin by saying well done last night. You held the ring for a good couple of hours, and also in the negotiations on local government reorganisation, representing us in that rather difficult arena at this point. So although we didn't vote, I know that there was universal support for the papers last night. So I just wanted to put on record our thanks. I also wanted to just reiterate the point you've actually made it this morning, that as a group, we're very much in favour of devolution. And I think the fact that the 4 authorities are coming together to form the combined authority with an elected mayor next May, and have that overarching sort of total system approach to Hampshire and the Solent is going to be a positive thing, and hopefully help us to join things up. So I think in devolution terms, I hope the road is clear for us to move forward. I couldn't agree more with you in terms of local government reorganisation, the need to stay together. I think you and I have talked about this before. I think it's absolutely crucial that you and the Chief Executive are at the table throughout this to ensure that we understand where things will ebb and flow over the coming months, and appreciate that this is not a quick decision. It will take many weeks and months to conclude, I'm sure. And also, I couldn't agree more with the view that we need to do this to ourselves. We do not need to wait for the government to put a marker pen on a map. a dreaded Sharpie maybe on the map and draw a line. We need to understand, we understand better, all of us, our residents, and we should actually make sure that we conduct this in a way that gives us a good conclusion. You use my phrase, and I would really encourage this, still with pride, from others around the country, because there are many ways of doing all of this. We've heard from political colleagues, I'm sure, and other officers around the country of how they have implemented certain elements of local government reorganisation, and it is incumbent, I think, upon us to understand what is working and how we might use that knowledge to help us in our journey. I also want us to make sure that our residents are at the heart of the delivery, and I think you heard loud and clear last night that desire to understand the engagement plan more clearly than just a line on the timetable. But I couldn't reinforce more the need for a sustainable solution for Hampshire and the Solent. We absolutely don't want to be in a position in 2 or 3 years' time where we're scraping around for money because the way that we put things together simply doesn't work. So absolutely a sustainable solution, and they all districts need to be really on board with that key point. You've mentioned the staff, Chair, and I think it's absolutely crucial that we are alongside them. I know the Chief Executive is keeping a watchful eye and communicating, as we know she does and will continue to do. It is their livelihood, and it's an uncertain time for all of them, and in all of the councils, in fact. And where the dice will finally land, of course, will mean different things to different people. But we need to be mindful of that. They are loyal to us, and we need to repay that loyalty by looking out to their needs. And a bit like you, I thought overnight, Chair, about one of the conversations we had last night and one after the meeting, which is about the potential for the councillor structure going forward, not really to be encouraging of a multitude of individuals. If we're not careful, given that we already have wards, I think of 6,000-7,000 residents, and if we're going to 5,000 or 6,000 residents per person, that's a huge job. And many of the councillors I was talking to last evening say, you know, that being a councillor is a full-time job. And if you're not careful, we'll find it's people who perhaps got the time in retirement or who have a bank balance that can accommodate it. And we don't have the cross-section of our residents that we would want as councillors. So that democracy point, that discrimination point, I'd hope that you would also take to your discussions with your fellow councillors as we move forward, because I think that will have an unintended consequence for our residents if we're not careful. So, Chair, I thank you for allowing me to add to the discussion this morning. I hope, as I say, we are absolutely in support of the paper before us, and we look forward to working with you over coming months to ensure that there's an outstanding decision for all of the councils in Hampshire and the Solent in due course. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Horrell. Thank you indeed for your comments and for your support. And indeed, I'm very grateful for the level of support from councillors from all parties and none as we go through this whole process. I agree with you on devolution. We need to do it at pace and do it well. I agree with you on sticking to one process and the need to get to a local solution. Our council plan absolutely puts listening and learning at the heart of what we do. And that is something that we need to carry over into our work on local government reorganisation. You're absolutely right to highlight the financial issues. They are the biggest concern. And if, you know, the lesson from Somerset, there's been a recent report on how they ended up as they were. And it was the failure to resolve those and sort those out in advance that has led to those the big issues that they now face. I'm glad that you repeated your point about staff. and the importance of, firstly, how dependent, obviously the vital role they play in everything we're doing now, but how grateful we should be for the commitment and the support that they need in the journey forward. And I strongly agree with the point that emerged in last night's debate and that you've repeated today about the need to make sure that these councils are designed in such a way that they have a broad and representative group of people involved in how they're run. So thank you for all of those comments. It's very helpful. And again, you know, we will keep working together as we go forward in any future negotiations and discussions. Cabinet, does anybody have any questions that they want to add or any comments? I think, you know, Councillor Porter.
Just got one comment, actually. I was reflecting on the engagement part of what we were discussing last night. And people have many issues going on in their lives, and I certainly write something every month in the parish magazines, and have been writing for 3 months and have had one comment back, inviting comment every time. So it's not something on the head of everybody's, on top of everybody's list. They're coping with their bins, their parks, their housing needs, their care. So I was wondering whether we can consider, as part of this, a bite-sized engagement process. I don't know. It's a big subject. When you talk to people, they mix up the two, they can't understand, and actually they don't bother. And many people have commented to me about the useful input from your 1 hour briefing that you gave online. Many people found that really interesting, and it came up at 2 or 3 parish councils about how useful it was, because it really put it in almost words of one syllable of where we were going next. So I think the most important aspect for me is how important, when people make a decision and make their response, about the sustainable solution for each of those unitaries that are going forward. One of the, I think it was Councillor Brophy last night who pointed out that we need that information before the thinking person can come back with a unitary response. So a lot of the data that's out there is actually quite hidden to the general public. And rightly so, in many, not rightly so, it's hidden, but it's not particularly in the forefront of everybody's minds when they're discussing this. But it is actually really important to look at how a unitary can become financially viable and how the combined authority can become financially viable. When the new mayor takes over, they'd hate to find that they're going to have a precept that's so massive, a council tax that's so massive, that's going to have a huge impact on the general public when they receive their council tax bill. So I think there's an aspect of bite size engagement, so that people can take it in small amounts, and also having an opportunity to share what challenges there are to making a sustainable solution. And finally, just really for that mayor in charge to make sure people understand that that's an additional cost that will be there from the mayoralty.
Thank you very much indeed. I mean, it's important to say that at this stage we don't quite know what the full council tax impact is likely to be of all of these changes. But you're right, absolutely, that in terms of impact and I think it will only become real and something that people find easy to respond to once it gets to the point of being more concrete. You know, it's not a coincidence that the parishes that are engaged in the topic are the ones where people are saying, well, what happens if you take Southwark and Wickham or Denmead and make them part of Portsmouth? That's where the discussion starts. And then again, I think it's as people start thinking of the physical consequences of that, that those discussions become interesting. Any other comments or questions?
I'd just like to congratulate you as leader and chief executive for actually so effectively bringing together the 15 authorities and producing something that is clear, is unanimously agreed we should submit. That's our decision today. I think the debate yesterday was really useful to bring out all the areas that we need to consider going forward, but I wholeheartedly support the submission of this document.
Thank you very much indeed, Deputy Leader. Right, I would like now to move to the recommendations. We have 3 recommendations in front of us. The first is that it approves the submission of the Joint Interim Plan for Local Government Reorganisation in Hampshire and Solent, dated the 21st of March 2025, as requested by the Government. It's Appendix 2. Second, it agrees that any minor amendments to the interim plan are agreed by all 15 councils. The leader, in consultation with the chief executive, has authority to update the submission on behalf of Winchester City Council. And the third delegates authority to the chief executive and I to negotiate the final business case for local government reorganisation prior to approval by council and submission to government later in 2025. Cabinet, are you agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed. Before we finish, I need to make an announcement. I have an update on River Park Leisure Centre. We have had confirmation from the University of Southampton of a planned investment of more than £30 million to their premises in our city. But following their consideration of the options, which took account of the overall economic environment for the university sector and for construction projects more generally, investment in River Park Leisure Centre is not part of that plan. Obviously, I'm disappointed, but I understand the reasons, and now we need to look to the future. So I've instructed officers to begin an open process of finding a new partner who can invest in the site, subject to 3 conditions. Firstly, the green space, whether park, sports or play area, tennis courts or access through the site, is wholly out of scope. Secondly, the public have a proper say during the process. And thirdly, provision of the skate park and indoor bowling must be absolutely protected. Thank you very much. I think that concludes the business for the day. So I declare the meeting closed.